I would say, like, what about energy consumption? Like the fact that the fire departments have to burn diesel generators just to have enough power in the summer for all the people here, to me is a sure sign that there's too many people. Or the
Yeah,
fact that
every source.
yeah, and right, and you can't even get a boat to go off island if you have to have a surgery in Boston because they're all booked up. Like that's a sure sign that, we're over the limit. So I mean, my question would be like your flight example is great, but how do you actually stop it?
Yeah. I mean, just on that too, Eversource burns over 1 million gallons of diesel every summer to keep up with the electricity demand until they replace the cable and add another cable, which adds more ability for us to use electricity. Now, we recognize that as we transition away from fossil fuels, we do need more electricity, but we can't just keep increasing demand for energy and expect to keep up with it. And the problem is that the planet is finite. If everybody lived like an average American on this planet, we would need 5 Earths to sustain that, and we just don't have 5 Earths. So, we either going to be shocked by a massive deceleration, or we're going to figure out how to transition in an equitable way over time.
So reduction is the word. Reduction and redirecting a lot of our mindsets seems to be what is really coming to the surface here, and just reimagining what our economy could be, reimagining and pulling from the past some things that maybe we can reinstitute, like we were talking about cobblers and menders of things and making things here sustainable on the island. So just to shift the conversation just a little bit, because that really, what we've been talking about is something that we definitely need to move towards and continue conversations with. Am I right, Ben? I mean, these are things that are not easily solved, but but they must be thought about. And
First and foremost, we have to acknowledge the problem,
yeah,
or we can even challenge ourselves to think about what does that look like. And so, acknowledging the problem is the first step. And not enough people want to acknowledge this problem. It's a really hard problem to acknowledge, even in your everyday life. When you think about it, you just want to ignore that, right? You want to
yeah.
ignore that I can't do this or that. The idea is like, oh, I can just get an electric vehicle and I've done my part. That's not actually true. You need to actually get out of a vehicle and start biking, walking, using public transit. But the public transit on this island is not adequate yet. The biking trails are not adequate yet. The walking is not adequate yet. So we have to provide the infrastructure for people to be able to make this transition. It's not on the backs of individual choice. It's on policy. It's on island-wide decision making. It's about providing that infrastructure that allows people to say, my quality of life didn't decline when I started using public transit. In fact, it got better, right?
Yeah,
We have to provide that for people.
Yeah, because there's so many just physical health things that we can live longer because we're walking more. We can, our food is doesn't have so many miles on it, so it's healthier for us and things like that. Um, Charles, we can also learn a lot from looking at other places too, and we tend to put, like you said, Ben, our heads down and just look at what's in front of us. But what happens to us when coastal cities like Boston and New York are regularly flooding? Will there be any resources available for a small island resort?
No, that's a great question, and what we see with like Hurricane Harvey, for example, which tore through big cities like Houston, but then also hit areas like Aransas and Port Aransas, is that the electricians, the contractors, the plumbers, they're going to the big cities in those situations, and that's partly because that's where they live, generally, and they're not necessarily in the more remote areas, and the rebuild's much faster there. So I think the term that keeps coming up, which I think is really important, is the self-sufficiency. You saw this with COVID on a broader scale with the US as a whole. When we didn't manufacture our own stuff, when we didn't have our own stuff, it wasn't coming from other countries because there was a shortage. I think Dan's brought up some really good points about how the ag sector is really becoming more self-sufficient, and we need to support that. We need to support the jobs and have people living on the island that can help in times of acute hazards, because are they going to be taking a ferry over when Boston, for example, gets hit from another event? Probably not. They're probably going to stay where they are and wait till that area bounces back and then come over. And by that time, you're already a year or two down the road and what has happened to the community. So I think, again, self-sufficiency, self-sustainability, in supporting those businesses and making it so those people can live on the island, that you have that diversity of jobs is just something that we sort of see is really important. And I had a great project with the National Institute of Standard Technologies, where we got to go to places that were hit by tornadoes, hurricanes, riverine flooding, and the ones that had those great grassroots organizations like the Vineyard has, and the ones that had those self-sustaining resources recover the fastest, and get back to not only their normal way of life, but a better way of life often, because those events can be a really good opportunity to reframe where you want to be.
That's again a recurring theme tonight, is reframing what we have and looking at how resourceful and self-sustainable we can be, and once were on Martha's Vineyard. So what are some things we could learn from other communities, Charles? Like, what are some of these other communities doing to address the economic impacts of climate change?
Yeah, so a lot of this is sort of short-term plans. How are you going to deal with supply chain crises? Are you self-sustainable? Do you have the natural resources? Do you have the human capital to recover from the acute events? But then sometimes when those acute events happen, do you have a plan in place for how you want to be? Because so much of it is, let's build back to exactly the same way we are. And the reality is, when an acute event happens, that is your best opportunity. You're going to have your least amount of pushback for making some changes. Are we going to build that mansion on a spot that's going to be flooded 5 times over? Or are we going to think about, well, maybe we want to make this into a park area, or something like that, where we're not kind of sustaining the same issues over and over again. People aren't going to give up a house when it's not flooded, but when it's completely flattened, there's that opportunity. So what needs to happen is that plan needs to be in place, and you don't want an event happening like that, but as they do, having the zoning in place, having the next steps in place so that you are ready to implement them when that happens is important. And then making sure that you're pushing all along, like Ben's been talking about and Dan's been talking about and Liz has been talking about, keep pushing in that direction regardless of if that event happens. Yes, we want to have change. We want to progress change. We want to keep pushing towards change, but take advantage when you can take advantage. And unfortunately, it's oftentimes when those acute events happen that you do see the most dramatic change, if you're prepared for what that next step is.
Ben, going back a little bit, just building off of what Charles is talking about now, I mean, looking at our overall island infrastructure, our town finances, and our cost of living, how will climate change affect that and make the towns rethink things?
Yeah, I think this is something that worries me greatly, is that, you know, we're building up an expectation that we're going to continue to have the tax revenue that we have today. And, you know, we're borrowing against that. We're borrowing against our own futures in that way. And so I think that's something that we have to really think about, is how far in advance do we really want to borrow? You know, with the expectation that we may have a different tax structure in the future. We might not have the same revenue stream that we have today. But, you know, we have to look at this through a climate lens when we look at other problems that the island is dealing with. Take for example, the housing crisis of the island. A lot of that is the overproduction, right? We have to look at the demand side. Why is there such an acute crisis with housing? Why is there so many services that are needed here? Well, that's to service this economy, right? We need so many landscapers. We need so many healthcare workers. We need so many in hospitality. We need so many people in construction, because there is this demand for activity on the island, economic activity. And it's not the right type of economic activity. So when we think about the housing crisis, you know, instead of building new structures to house all of this new workforce that we need, we should be more thinking about how do we repurpose the existing structures to provide housing for people year round, for the community. You know, a lot of these houses that are now short-term rentals, they used to be our grandmother's houses or our aunts or our uncles' houses or even our own houses, right? We need to gain those houses back and make those part of our year-round community, and not just a seasonal vehicle for somebody to make money off of. And I think so when we think about the housing problem, we have to think about that through a climate lens. We're not just going to be able to build more and more and more on the island. We're going to have to start thinking about how do we regain some of that existing housing, make it year-round housing, make it community housing, make those the people that are going to do these jobs that we're going to need, whether it's the cobbler or the farmer or the fisherman. Those are all things that we're going to need. And I think that human capital is our greatest asset. And so we have to have a strong community.
I think if I could, Ben and I look at everything through a climate lens. And I really think that as a community as a whole, we need to do that. And I think what we really need to do is have the town leaders start thinking about these issues, which I do not think they are thinking of at all at this point. We need to keep talking about this because we we need to have a plan in place for the towns if we have a catastrophic hurricane, so that we do build back in a reasonable, wise, and sound way, and that we don't allow rebuilding in the chaos after a storm where we shouldn't be building. And the town budgets are going to suffer when houses are lost to the sea, and the property tax income is going to decrease, and the rest of our taxes will go up. Insurance will go up, the cost of living will go up. And we really need to be thinking about all those things as we look to the future. And the town needs to look at all that and also look at the fact that the adaptation methods we're looking at are going to cost a lot of money too. And so is the storm damage repair, so there's a lot of financial issues that need to be addressed on the town level. And I wish some of the selectmen were here to hear this conversation, because I think right now they need to be listening.
And there's some really nice things happening though to also keep workers here, like kids coming out of high school and not having to go off island to get educated for things too, and being trained for jobs that we do need in this community, and that can feed into what you're talking about, Liz and Ben, through the MVCET, which that's a Ben. What can the high school and the MVCET do to help with the transition of new jobs and new opportunities?
Yeah, simple things, teach kids how to deal with electric motors. I mean, they have still small engine repair as part of the high school curriculum, and it's, don't learn how to fix a small gas engine. That's not going to be a job that we need. We need people that know how to wire an electric motor, know how to wire solar panels, know how to wire heat pumps. Electricians, we're going to need a lot of electricians. We're going to need, people that work with their hands. I think there's lots of opportunities that are not sort of the traditional high school, college, graduate school. A lot of those jobs, unfortunately, are going to be competing with AI, and AI is going to win, unfortunately, in a lot of those jobs. So working with your hands, so far, the robots haven't taken over those jobs yet. That's what to look forward to, is how to build an electric car, right? How do you convert a 1972, gas car that's a classic into an electric car for the vineyard? That's a small business that you could develop. So I think there's lots of creative things that people can start to do, but use that human capital.
I love that human capital, and just the way the conversation's going. And I know I'd been talking about going back, and Ben, you corrected me, and you had said, well, we need to move forward, but maybe bringing some of the old ideas, the tried and true from our grandparents and our great grandparents, and bring those into the present and merge it with what's happening right now. It sounds like it's the perfect marriage between, the old and the new concepts.
One thing we could do, is we could really look to the Wampanoags, as you mentioned earlier in the program, to traditional land use practices, and use their knowledge as a guide for us, on how to care for and revere the land in ways that's going to continue in the future. And there are a lot of job opportunities. There's a lot of good job opportunities that are going to be created due to these impacts. One of them was sustainable landscaping. We really don't need green lawns. They have no biodiversity. We really need native species and people who understand,
The vineyard lawn.
the vineyard lawn, exactly. And we need people who know how to produce and design green infrastructure. Instead of pipes pumping our rainwater into the harbors, we need to create parks that have bio retention areas and rain gardens and things that can collect and absorb the stormwater. You know, we've got to really think out of the box and be creative, but there are a lot of job opportunities if we do that.
Yeah, I'd even go a step further and say the vineyard lawn was just, clear away, what was natural and hope grass grows. We don't, if we're going to clear away what's there, we should be using it for production, for food.
Right.
Go beyond the vineyard lawn, go to how could my landscape, the small part that I'm going to remain landscaping, let the rest of it just go natural. The natural world has a chance to recover if we give it the chance. But how do we take our landscaped areas and instead of it just being for flowers, throw some food in there, grow some food. You can produce a lot of food in the growing season on the vineyard. And some of that food can last all through the winter. You can eat cabbage and squashes and even apples and potatoes. They'll last through the whole winter. So those sort of traditional methods of food growing during the growing season and then like having that food for the rest of the year, those are important things that we have to reestablish. And we can do it with all of the new science and technology that we have today, right? So we don't have to go back to homesteading like it was in the 1800s, but we can take some of those practices and combine it with what we know today and come out of this on the other side a much more enlightened community.
Well, I mean, this conversation has been far-ranging and wide-ranging and very inspiring. And I think that we have discovered ways that we can be more self-sufficient. Last week, Noli Taylor from IGI, Island Grown Initiative, talked about home gardens, and they have all kinds of workshops that can help us learn how to use our land exactly how you were just speaking of, Ben. With the 3 minutes we have left, I guess just to sum up some of the more optimistic things, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here and we haven't even touched the surface. We could probably talk for several more hours about all of these things that have to do with our local economy and how the climate will impact it. But Oak Bluffs did a study that put a dollar value of the benefits of their coastal natural resources. What did that tell us, Liz? This is interesting.
Yeah, in 2017, we did a study to find out the dollar value of the recreational value of our public coastal resources, the shellfish, commercial and recreational shellfishing values, the salt marsh values, which include flood protection, pollution prevention, wildlife diversity, fish and shellfish habitat, carbon sequestration, all of that, and they included arts. A lot of people photograph and take pictures of the coastline and sell that. So this group looked at all these different things and they determined that the annual dollar value of Oak Bluff's public coastal resources is between 133 and 168 million dollars a year. So that just, is one of the is a symbol of why we need to protect our coastline, why we need to protect our salt marshes and protect our natural diversity, our biodiversity, and our habitat, because it has value. It has value. It has value, to us that it provides us with benefits for free that we would have to otherwise pay for. If we lost our salt marshes and we had to build a flood retention system, it costs billions of dollars. Netlands are doing that for us. So it's important that we realize that and protect and preserve, our natural environment.
Final question. I want each of you to kind of share your little tips here, how we can become a more self-sufficient island to buffer the impacts of climate change. Dan, how do you think we can do that?
Eat more shellfish. Go out and rake it up yourself, or trade a farmer for some oysters for some whatever you can offer. And then get the shells back to the MV shell recycling program so that they can make more wild shellfish that'll clean our ponds and feed us all.
Excellent. Ben?
I would say advocate the leadership of the island to start thinking about these things. It's not going to be on the backs of individual choice that we fix this. It has to be at the policy level. And so that once you have a policy that everybody, or at least the majority of people can accept, it's a lot easier for people to follow that than why am I doing it and my neighbor's not doing it? So I think advocate the island leadership to take action.
So we have to go to our meetings, our town meetings, and we have to talk to our selectmen, select people, and really have our voices be heard.
Yeah, and you got it. And you know, we are lucky on the island that we still have town meeting. We still have an advocacy that we can go talk to our selectmen. We probably know them personally. Use that power.
It is a pretty rare and wonderful way that we operate out here. We do have more impact than we think. Charles?
Yeah, I think tackling the housing, I guess you might call it sort of the housing crisis of, can you have affordable housing to support jobs, to make a diverse economy, is really important for self sustainability, so that again people can live there, all around, all year round, and support sort of that just more diverse, resilient economy. And then the other thing I would just add is, I think Ben had a good quote that the vineyard's not going to change the trajectory of the world, but if the vineyard can be a leader in this area, sort of when you can lead and show the way for other areas are looking for examples of how to do it. And that's the type of thing where you can really leverage changes in the world by showing a way that it can be done right. So that now what you've done to mitigate that small little percent of greenhouse gases that you are to the rest of the world can be amplified dramatically. So I think once you get it right, share that with the rest. Everybody's looking for that way.
Thank you so much, Charles. And Liz?
I would say local renewable energy, produce more food, turn our waste into usable products, and a couple of other quick things. We have an incredible history here with the tribal history, the whaling history, the campground, the Portuguese history. We really we have so many things here that are attractive to people that don't have to affect our natural resources. People can come and enjoy our beautiful architecture, go to the museums, things like that. And it's people is my bottom line. We have creative, strong, community-minded people here, and I think we need to just um, maintain that community spirit and get to work.
Thank you all for being a part of this conversation tonight. Again, it's a conversation starter. We could go in so many different directions. I think what the main messages tonight have been, let's look at ways we can reduce. Let's talk to our town leaders so that we can get them understanding where we feel we need to reduce. And if anybody has any further questions or wants to take a deeper dive, go to thevineyardway.org. Contact anybody on this panel. They'd be happy, I'm sure. All four of you would be happy to talk more about the things that we've touched upon tonight. But just to think a little bit more and not put the blinders on, to stand up and actually see what's going on is what we need now more than ever, in order to make an impact going forward. So thank you so much. This has been recorded and it's going to be edited, because as you heard in the middle of it, we stopped recording. So there's going to be a little blip. It's going to be put on our community outreach page at mvyradio.org/community so everybody can watch it. You can spread the word about what was learned here tonight. And hopefully you'll join us next week when we have our final one on renewable energy, where we're going to go into more depth on that. I want to thank Cape Light Compact, Falmouth Marine, Northern Trust, CEDAR Construction and Property Management, CETO Cape and Islands and CETO Rhode Island, and Zoe and Company Professional Bra Fitters for underwriting this wonderful series. Dan Martino, Ben Robinson, Charles Goodhue, Liz Durkee, thank you so much for your wisdom and your time and efforts dedicated to illuminating all of these things for us as a community. It's such important information, and MVY Radio is so grateful to you.
Thank you, Laurel.
Yeah,
thank
thank you,
you,
Laurel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It's really important to talk about this, so thank you so much.
It is so important, and I know there's so much more to say. So please, if you have any questions, you can get questions to these people through me, if that's the easiest way, or if you know them, just talk to them and talk to your select people too. So thank you so much for being here tonight, and have a wonderful rest of your beautiful spring evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Liz, thank you so much. I think that went really well.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah,
I think that, you know,
yeah,
everybody brought such important things to say.
yeah.
And you know, I think that we covered a lot of the questions that were in there, but it was just like we were hopping around. And
Yeah, it was great.
you brought up things that I didn't even need to ask you questions about that you had included in the questions. So I didn't ask you, which was fantastic because it was natural. It was part of the conversation.
Great. Yeah, it was just a real nice, easygoing conversation. It was really, really good. You know, I have to ask you, there are actually bra fitters out there still in the world?
Yes. Yes, isn't that funny? I know. Zoe, professional bra fitters. I know, and I guess they're really, really good.
That's good.
We should take a field trip and go over there. I love it.
Oh God. No, thank you so much again. That was really fun.
Thank
Really
you
good.
so much, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah.
I couldn't do this without you. I mean, I felt a little more confident going in just because of the conversation we had. I know nothing about economy, and
Yeah.
but I feel like everybody who watches this is going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great job. Thank you so
Well,
much.
you did the great job. I'm glad you feel that I did it justice and moderating it, but everybody was wonderful. So thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you.
I'll
All
see you
right.
Thursday evening.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good
Have a
night.
good night. Bye.
Bye.